Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing, the podcast for manufacturing leaders and professionals.
Designed for high impact on your way to work or unwind on your way home to gain clarity for tomorrow.
Step out of your comfort zone and discover new perspectives to add value, get results, and make a difference.
Yes, let's jump in.
Welcome to another episode of Mindfulness Manufacturing. And this is the first episode with my new co-host, Dave Baker.
Hey, welcome everybody.
Yeah, we're excited to keep on pivoting with this podcast and just how do we bring the best content to the listeners and the best guests.
We're super excited to have Brian Leising with us today. Can't wait to jump in.
Well, welcome, Brian.
I'm glad to be here. Really looking forward to this conversation with you guys.
Cool. Well, hey, just for our listeners, I wanted to introduce Brian briefly. He's been in the manufacturing world since 1995, and you would never know that because he still looks like he's 18, and it's amazing how some folks carry their age. But, Brian is an engineer by trade and has just come through manufacturing all these years. He's done some time in Korea and China, as well as different states in the U.S. working with a major automotive supplier, tier one supplier for many years. And currently he's in transition and with this organization in a large organization restructure. And Brian and I were talking a while back and thought, man, what a great opportunity to share some, hopefully for Brian to share some thoughts on what this mindfulness concept and how Brian has incorporated this just into his career. He's got a beautiful wife, Tamara, and two beautiful daughters. And we're just so glad to have Brian with us today, guys. So.
Yeah, when I went on that LinkedIn profile, I thought, who's this young guy here? How can he have all this experience? And in manufacturing and in a lot of industries, when you get into senior leadership positions like Brian, yeah, it's a lot of stress. It can burn you out and it can age you quickly. So my first question is, Brian, what are some of the practices that you've done to keep looking so young?
Boy, I think you guys are pretty good at buttering up your guest right at the beginning. I don't know. It must be DNA. I guess the other thing that I do, and it's certainly not intentional, maybe that winter weight, a little bit of extra weight helps with smoothing out those wrinkles. Of course, that LinkedIn picture is a few years old. If you see me today, there's a little bit more gray salted in that sandy blonde hair. That probably helps too.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Brian, in your career, you have no doubt faced adversity, and, to Trevor's, point, what have you done? How has mindfulness in your thought process, kept you young, no doubt, right? But how has this mindfulness maybe protected you, or maybe share with us some experiences you've had where you've seen a lack of mindfulness in other people tank their careers?
Yeah, so it's certainly an evolution. Starting out early in the career, like most of us, when we're young, full of fire, think we're going to conquer the world. I'm not so sure I was mindfulness. I think I had my ears pinned back. Not sure I had a real clear vision of where I wanted to go. I just knew I wanted to go forward, and I was going to charge pretty hard. I'd say when you do that, whether it's early in career or late in career, typically you'll end up, probably burning yourself out, but more importantly, there's a lot of collateral damage because you're unaware of the people that are around you. So I'd say over the last 15 years or so, my experience overseas in Korea gave me great, in China as well, gave me great cultural insights that people are both very different depending on the culture, but ultimately, if you spend a little bit of time to get to know them, really doesn't matter where you're from. People are all the same. They want the same basic things. The first thing I think most people want, especially in context of work, is they want to know that they're a part of something that's important and that what they're doing matters. And that's whatever position you're in the organization. So I'd say I've learned probably in the last 10 years, 15 years, really to look more at every person in the organization as somebody that's special and somebody that God created and God loves, and that they have something to add to the organization. If I just look at them as a means to the ends to get results, it's no good for them, and it's definitely no good for me.
Wow. Drop the mic.
So I also saw on your LinkedIn, you talk about servant leadership.
Yeah.
And, as a leader of the facility, there's a lot of companies that have core values. They advertise things on their job descriptions and on their placards. I know that you have actions in your plant representing that. And when you're trying to do what you just kind of described in servant leadership, how are you getting that through your entire team? Like, how do you demonstrate like observable behaviors that truly, show servant leadership?
That's a good question as well. I'd say this plant, so Dave mentioned I'm in a transition. We're actually combining 2 locations here in the Western Carolinas. But when I came to the plant that I was in about 2.5 years ago, that plant really was struggling financially. Morale was really low. And you could tell they'd been there 35 years through the high times, low times, but they were really beaten down. And I had a really important visit. I was there about 2 weeks, and I found out the CEO, the president, and all his staff were coming to my plant for an organizational review for the division. And they wanted from me, how are you going to turn this thing around? I've been there 2 weeks. Of course, I've been with the company 22, 23 years, the plant for 2 weeks. And I said, well, first thing we need to do, we need to make T-shirts, right? Because that's what everybody's going to do. It's tangible. It's something I can do and something we can all look sharp out on the shop floor. And we said, well, what are the T-shirts going to say? And I really sensed that organization was down. I said, how about P.R.O.U.D, Fletcher P.R.O.U.D? And we said, committed to excellence. And that pride isn't a bad pride. It's how can we build a sense of pride around the people and what we're doing there and build a culture around that. And eventually that P.R.O.U.D, it actually just started out literally as a T-shirt because I wanted us to all feel a little bit of sense of pride and also look sharp for our CEO. We actually then turned that P.R.O.U.D into an acronym, and it became the culture of that plant. And everything we do around that plant now is in the context of P.R.O.U.D. And what it stands for is the P is for proactive. We want to make sure that we're proactive and not reactive in the things that we do. R was respect for each other, respect for ourselves, respect for our community, and respect for our company. The O is ownership. We want to make sure people take ownership of the work that they do. U, we stole this one from David Covey, seek first to understand before you're understood. And then D was around disciplined and disciplined in the things that we do. We want to make sure that we're doing the right things and that we're doing only those things and nothing extra and nothing less. So that became kind of a cultural rallying cry for the plant, and it's still there today. If you walk through that plant, you'd see it everywhere. We have quotes from all of our leaders that say, what does that mean to you? And we rotate those on the wall. We recognize our employees. It's in the context of P.R.O.U.D. So that's kind of the way we translate kind of a corporate vision or values down to a plant level and what they mean to us.
Well, that's some great value right there for the listeners, Brian.
Very
Thanks for sharing
cool.
that.
Yep.
It just goes to prove it again. You have to start somewhere and you have to kind of create that vision. And just by a simple word like proud on a T-shirt, it starts the thinking. Yeah. And you got to start somewhere. You walk into that plant, you got 2 weeks, you got all corporate coming in. It's like, where do I start? Very innovative and obviously based on your results, very effective.
So Brian, that is it's a great description of the acronym of P.R.O.U.D. Of those 5 areas, which one have you found to be the one most difficult for people to embrace?
I think ownership's pretty straightforward. Understanding can be hard because we all want to get our point across before we really slow down to listen. But I think it's one that's probably had the most emphasis from, especially from our HR community and from myself as well, and me personally, because I've got the same tendency to want to start explaining myself. As soon as somebody opens their mouth, I'm not listening to understand, I'm listening to respond. I'd say the understanding is probably the one that takes the most intentionality.
Obviously, you're practicing that, Brian. And how do you get everyone doing that? Like, how do you get that momentum of people? Like, is there some peer accountability or something that you had going on there? How did you grow that?
It starts with modeling, doing it yourself. And I'd been there, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, and one of my staff members said, "Man, you don't ever get rattled in a heated discussion." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, yeah, but there's a lot of internal damage." What I meant by that was is I'm listening and I'm trying to control my response. I said, you may not see the emotion that I'm feeling because I'm trying to contain that, and I want to make sure that I don't blow up a conversation by being irrational or emotional or getting ahead of it. And I think that type of behavior at a leadership level starts to set expectation. And if you see somebody not modeling it, you have to call each other out. And we told in the all employee meetings when we started really rolling this out, one of the things we said is in that ownership, said, you guys are accountable to us just like we're accountable to you. When you see us not modeling a behavior that we said we wanted to commit to, you need to call us out on it. I wouldn't say it's 2 years in. I mean, we're not perfect yet, but I think people understand what we're trying to be. And when they see a behavior that's counter to that, it's at least discussed, if not pointed out directly. So I'd say we've seen a lot of progress in that area, and really just comes down to modeling and setting expectations and humility when you mess up yourself, and you will, because things do get pretty heated and there's a lot of pressure in corporate America to go back and apologize when you need to and say, look, I didn't live up to the value that I said we were going to. I think if you model that over time, it's inevitable. It'll start to stick.
And funny, through so many organizations, they just seem not to have the time for that. And like you said, it's that you want to talk about discipline. The discipline's going back and saying, you know what, Brian, I probably overreacted there, and I need to do better next time. I just want to, I recognize that, and that is vulnerability. And in the pride that we have, sometimes that's one of the hardest things to do.
It's rewarding when you do it.
Yes. Once you start doing it and you have the courage to get uncomfortable, then it's like, okay, now I've earned some more respect with that person. I'm more aware now. And we always talk about that golf game, right? You're just hitting the green more often. And people think emotional intelligence is that you can always control your emotions. And it's really just being more aware of it. It's like you said with the internal dialogue. It isn't like the dialogue. We all love to judge and have opinions, but the difference is, can I hold it inside my head for a little while?
Mm-hmm. Brian, you had said it's just rewarding. I mean, it's crazy how rewarding doing the right thing, holding people accountable, being mindful of saying when you did not do right, coming up and saying, hey guys, I apologize for that. How would you define rewarding? What does that look like when you sit back and say, man, that was, what's rewarding mean?
I guess the definition of success I can give you is when I see someone on my team that is realizing their potential and realizing maybe something they didn't believe they could be or do, and they get that success, and that success is directed at them and not at me as their leader. For me, that's just satisfying. It's like watching your children do something that's truly their own. You know, they get into those teenage years and it's really their own thing, and they've had their own success. And it's just incredibly satisfying. I think the years and the effort and the time that you put into someone's life, that they then reap the rewards. And again, to me, there's nothing better than those rewards being completely directed at the person that did it, not the person that helped them get there. But knowing you were a part of it, right?
Yeah.
Being able to see that, okay, some of those conversations, they stuck, they set in and they understood them and they took them probably further than I ever thought they could. And you see them blossom and do something amazing. And it's just cool to be people's cheerleader and cheer them on when they do that.
Mm-hmm.
One of those core values that I saw, there's Brian, is around integrity. And when you think about integrity, I think about the uncompromising adherence to those strong moral and ethical principles and values, or honesty and truthfulness, accuracy of one's actions. And people love to use the word integrity, and it's much more difficult to exercise. So, and I obviously I can see that that's a big part for your daily actions and how you've had your success. But where have you had challenges with that? What are the things you've learned through there to build that integrity? What's maybe some of the difficulties you've had and you've had to get over through that? Yeah,
I think, coming from, again, the corporate world in a publicly traded company, there's a lot of external pressures on a plant manager, really on anybody in that organization. And I wouldn't say that necessarily or at all intentionally would cause somebody to struggle with an integrity issue. When you're trying to balance what you're trying to do at the pace you're trying to do at a local manufacturing level versus the expectations of a broader organization, the temptation can be there to take shortcuts, right? So we said we were going to do it this way, man, but the organization just doesn't like it. So sorry, we're just going to cave and we're not going to do it the way we said we were going to do. Certainly there are times you have to align with the company, align with an organization, say, look, we said we were going to do this. Things have changed outside of our control and we're going to make an adjustment. But what you really don't ever want to do is, one, don't blame something external to you for why you're changing direction. Be clear and transparent, honest. Say, I don't like this either. It's not what we thought we were going to do. Much like this consolidation that we're doing. This wasn't my plan. This isn't what I expected to do. I want this plant that I'm in to be here another 30 years. What I could easily do is say, somebody outside of my control made this decision. I don't like it. It stinks. It's wrong. I could blame a lot of people, and that doesn't do anybody any good. I can certainly say, guys, this isn't where I wanted to go. This isn't what I thought we were going to do. But it's a change of course. It's not the end. So let's pick ourselves up. Let's adjust and figure out how we can move forward with the circumstances we have. So really, I guess the key takeaway there for me is avoiding blaming somebody else for a situation you don't like, and accept ownership and responsibility for your role in it, and then cascade that throughout the organization. So transparency and avoiding blaming somebody, because that takes away anything from your leadership when you say there's a force outside of my control making me do something I don't want to do. I think you fail as a leader when you do that.
Ties right into your O of proud there. I can remember early on, I was a materials leader, and my general manager basically pushed enough that we had to terminate a supervisor. I didn't agree with it. I kind of thought to myself, well, he's telling me I got to do it, so I just got to go and do it. It was absolutely the worst termination I've ever had in my career. I've never had one like it again, because I talked myself into it that it was out of my control. He didn't force me to do it. He just told me to do it, and I had a choice. So, yeah, I can feel what you're saying, Brian.
That's in a lot of the work I've done with frontline leaders over the years. There's a consistent tendency, especially in newer leaders, but even those depending on the culture of the organization, but so many frontline leaders, Brian, and to your point, their go-to position, they think it's the right thing to do is to say, do this because that's what my boss said to do. And we're doing this because that's what the plant manager said. That's what, this is why we're doing it. And they refuse to jump in and say, this is what we're doing as from me as your leader. Yes, we're part of a larger organization. But that abdication of responsibility for sometimes tough decisions and actions seems to have is a consistent tendency for people in leadership positions. And it's so refreshing to listen to you talk about how, the buck stops here, right? I mean, you can't say, well, corporate told us or our leadership team told us. As a leader, whatever level you're in, it's here's what we're doing and why we're doing it, period. And the opportunity to justify it, with others, sometimes, may be appropriate, but, the impact it has on your credibility and people's trust and respect of you is just, it's crazy how significant that is.
When it feels wrong, it usually is wrong.
Yeah, and I'd say once you've made the decision that you want to remain in the organization, there's going to be a lot of decisions in our careers that we really don't like. Some that we make that our people aren't going to like, right? But once you've decided I'm staying in this organization, the last thing you want to do is run around telling people that somebody above me made a terrible decision that now I'm being forced to take. So no, you're not being forced to take that. Your decision was to stay or to go. And once you decide to stay, your choice is to move forward with the rest of the organization and do the right thing.
Buck stops here. I like that. When I remember watching a maintenance leader roll out to all his techs, and it was about the weekend and overtime and these PMs. He's like, yeah, because the boss says we need to do it. And I could see it in the people's eyes that they all just lost faith in him. Because as soon as he said, I have to do this because, it was over.
At any level in the organization, whether it's an hourly team leader or senior vice president of operations, every position this applies to every position in an organization. And it's just fascinating that there is no shortage of examples to think back in our minds over the years as to, how this happens.
Yeah. And you talk about deeper in the organization. And I think the deeper you get in the organization, once a decision's been made, the more important clear communication is, because we all think we communicate great. And the reality is most of us probably don't. So one of the things my HR director, and her, Dave, here in the Fletcher plant's been really good helping me with is transparency, but then also that alignment down the organization. So we've had to make a lot of hard decisions in the last 2.5 years. What we always do before we communicate to our workforce is we get each level of the organization, the leadership teams, together in a room, and we explain what it is we're doing and why we're doing it. And we look for that alignment and understanding. Do you understand what we said we're doing? Do you have questions? And are you ready to be able to answer those questions, or at least move forward and talk to your people and say, yeah, this is what I know and this is why we're doing it. And then it's okay to be vulnerable and say, I don't know the answers to all of it, and come back and ask for those answers. But it's so important to have that, take the time to communicate to each leader in the organization the why, what you're doing, and give them the opportunity to ask questions. Because otherwise, the worst thing you do is give them a memo and say, go read that to your team. They don't stand a chance, right? Nobody writes that well.
And you've seen that, Brian. You've seen that firsthand, right?
Nothing more frustrating when you receive that memo at the same time the rest of the organization does, and you're like, crap, how am I going to explain this to anybody? Because I don't even know what it means.
Love it. Brian, you've given us some great information here. And if there's one thing, as these listeners, whatever type of workforce they're driving into today, when they're listening or maybe on their way home, what's the one thing when they remember listening to you would want them to remember to make their day better?
Yeah, I think maybe back early when we were talking, recognizing that everybody in the organization matters and they play a role, and that what they're doing, while it may be hard for you to really understand and see in the bigger context of the organization, it's extremely important to them, and they want to know that they're valued and that they're contributing. So take the time. When I came into this plant, one of my friends, Scott Bigger as well, Dave, he told me to make sure to be very intentional about getting on the shop floor and getting to know especially the hourly workers, to show them that you respect them, and that cascades up and down the organization. So be intentional, try to understand what it is each person does, and then show them that you respect and appreciate them for what they do. It could be what seems like the smallest role in the organization, but it matters to them. They come to work every day. They want to know that they're valued and that they can contribute in some way to the broader picture. And then, of course, it helps if when you have those conversations with them, you explain what that big picture is, right? So what is it we're here to do? We're just here to make car parts, and my job is to put this fastener in all day long. Yeah, that's okay, I guess. But if your job is to drive an organization forward and make it a better place for people to work and somewhere you can feel proud to be a part of, and you can help them understand how what they do in even a small way, that it contributes to that bigger picture and what they can do to make it a better place to work.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Love it.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey, Brian, so just as we start to wrap up here, two things. One, what's the thing that you most like to do in your spare time? And two, as an up and coming leader that may be listening, what would be that one word of advice? Like, put your head down, stick to it. I mean, what's the one word of advice for an up and coming leader after you share with us what you do in your spare time that people may not know?
Boy, I don't have a lot of spare time right now, but when I do, I've got an old truck that I've been rebuilding for the last 5.5 years. I had an old pickup truck in high school that I dated Tamara in. I got rid of that when I went to college. Always wanted another one, bought one about 15, 16 years ago. Actually, when I was living in Korea, an old beater that was out in the field, stripped it down to the frame, and I've been building it back up since.
Cool.
It'll become a bit of a love-hate relationship, to be honest with you. It's a money pit, but it's therapeutic. My dad and my brother and I used to work on that old truck. My dad's gone. I lost him when he was 45. So that's probably one thing that I really enjoy. It gets me away from everything else that I'm doing and kind of gets back to my roots. What would I tell an up-and-coming person? Boy, I wouldn't say pin your ears back and put your head down. What I'd say is lift your head up and look around and try to figure out what it is that this company does and where do I see myself fitting in to make it a better place. If it's all about you, you'll probably progress in your career, but you'll probably also move around a lot. So find a company that you believe you can contribute to their core values and beliefs and make them better. Don't spend a lot of time looking for a company that's going to make you a whole lot better, because that's a pretty big burden to put on an organization when there should be some personal accountability to doing that yourself.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for taking your time out today and sharing, your knowledge with our community. Greatly appreciate it. That was awesome.
I appreciate the time. This was fun. I hope somebody picks up at least a little bit out of what we shared today. There's so much more to learn.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks, you too.
Thanks for taking the time to join us today. How you show up matters.
We'd love for you to subscribe, share with a colleague, and tell us what you think.
Your feedback's important to provide this high-quality, powerful program that makes a difference in your life and others. Take care.
See you next time.